to the channel, and today I'm going to be doing a quick rundown of the Flamma Innovation FS03 multifunction digital delay. Also, before we start, I'm sorry I sound so bunged up. It's not COVID. It's just the last little bits of a cold, so I'm sorry that sounds a little bit like the. But I'll try my best. So this delay has 6 different algorithms ranging from sort of your standard nice tape sounding delay all the way up to some really crazy modulated blip synth stuff. It's super cool, but because it does so much, I'm kind of going to have to do a bit of a whistle stop run through it. So I thought I'd just go through each parameter, and then at the end we'll have a little look through the 70-second looper that comes with this as well. Cool, so before we start, quick rundown of what we've actually got here. So this is a full stereo delay. I'm currently running it in mono just because it's a bit easier, but you can run this in full stereo. Along the top here we've got fundamentally your standard delay control. So you've got mix or blend, you've got your time, which is the allocated time of the repeats, sort of how quick you want them, how slow you want them. This does also have tap tempo, we'll come on to that. And then feedback, which is just the number of repeats that you've got. So all of that's pretty standard to most delay pedals. On the bottom here, we have the tweak parameters. Now on each different algorithm, these tweak parameters will do different things, such as filtering, levels of modulation, input levels, output levels, things like that. So they're super versatile. And what's fantastic about this pedal is once you've found the sound that you like for that particular preset, you find the tape sound that you really like, you can save it. So this has not only got the 6 different algorithms, but it's got 6 savable presets as well, which is just outrageous. For the money, the tech that's in this pedal is phenomenal. So let's get started with algorithm number 1, tape. So before we get started, I will say as well, I've got a little bit of reverb coming from the Strymon Big Sky, but it's relatively minimal, but it just adds a little bit of space for it. So, like I say, we've got mix, time and feedback. On the tape setting, our first tweak knob, it's a filter fundamentally, so I'll just play and I'll show you how it alters the sound. So it kind of goes through into this lo-fi thing, and then it starts to roll the top off it as well. So it's kind of like a high pass, and then it rounds off. Quite interesting to get that kind of unique sort of vinyl-y kind of tape sound. Second one is your modulation. So obviously we all know tape delays, or a lot of the old original tape delays, as the repeats go on, there tended to be a slight wobble in the pitch as the repeats just kind of got lazier and lazier, and that's the sound you can get from this. So with it all the way off, it's quite a straight up clean delay. There's no modulation there. If I start to crank that in a bit, big kind of David Gilmour vibes off that. Right, moving on. Number 2. This is interesting. So this is where we start to get into some of the crazy sounds that this pedal offers. So again, top 3 standard delay settings. Bottom 2, this is fundamentally the rate of the step sequencer. I guess you could almost call it like a sequencer. So that's basically the rate, whether it's going or sort of more like standard. It all obviously aligns up with whatever the time is or your tap is. The second one is fundamentally just the depth of it, how intense you want it to be. So we'll start with it pretty intense so you can hear it. So this is the kind of thing we're getting from here. Pretty wild sounding stuff, especially if you start bringing all of the mix in as well. So when you crank the mix, what's cool is you can completely eliminate the dry signal. So you end up with some really freaky sounding stuff. Wobbly. Right, moving on. So parameter number 3 is called rainbow, and in here we basically have, it's kind of like an arpeggiator. So let me just show you. All of these effects, it's easier for me to just play it so you hear it, and then everything else that I explain will make sense. So you can hear it kind of jumping up. Well, it's currently jumping up in octaves. So tweak number 2 is changing the interval in which it jumps. So this can be a bit tricky, I'd say, because you don't get any indication of what interval you're jumping up in, whether you're jumping up in like sevenths or thirds or something like that. So it can be quite tricky. Anyway, everywhere from 12 o'clock onwards is climbing up, and everything from 12 o'clock backwards is climbing down. So all the way off, you're actually jumping down octaves in the repeats. Which is alright for high notes, but it can get pretty muddy on the lows. So let's leave it at an octave up. So tweak number 1 kind of has it's almost like a filter on the repeat, so it sort of takes away the intensity of the repeats a little bit, rolls the attack off, so all the way up. And all the way off. They sort of have a swell thing, which is quite nice, because then you get the effect without it being too in your face. So, algorithm number 4 is called Galaxy, and I guess it's kind of like quite an original sounding delay, but the tweaks give you that extra control over the modulation. So when you get it right, you can almost get this kind of big shimmery reverb sound out of it that's super cool. So tweak number 1, similar to how it worked on the previous one, basically is the filter or the attack of the repeats, so whether you want them more intense or less intense. And tweak number 2 is the intensity of the modulation. So 2 of those, let's line them up somewhere. That'll do. such a cool sound. I love that, especially when you combine it with some nice reverb as well. You get these huge kind of expansive sounds. Super cool. Quickly, while I'm on this setting, obviously our time knob here will adjust the time of the repeats. Quicker, slower. If you press and hold your bypass switch, that does allow tap tempo. Which is such a great feature, especially when you're playing live with a band, you know, as your drummer's counting you in, just tap in the tempo and you know your delay is going to be lined up. So long as you've got a good drummer. So that's a super cool feature. Again, then, if you decide that that's the tempo you always want and you're playing to a click track or something like that, you can save it just by pressing and holding the save and select button. That'll allow you to save that preset, and the time will therefore be the same every single time you go to that algorithm. So number 5 is called Modburst, and that fundamentally starts to introduce a flanging effect to the repeats. So you get this kind of quite 80s sort of sound, but I don't know, it's quite cool. So like on quite a lot of the, God, let me turn that down, it's making all sorts of flanger sounds. Quite a lot of these algorithms, the first tweak is fundamentally like the rate and the intensity, and the second is the amount of modulation of whatever that algorithm has to offer. So that tends to be pretty standard between all of them. Yeah, it's a super cool sound, you know, it does a thing, which is nice. But again, like if you control it and stuff, it doesn't have to sound like crazy 80s. You can get that nice kind of reverby, shimmery sort of sound out of it too, which is maybe a more practical use for it. Very nice. Moving on, number 6. So this is where it starts to get kind of weird. This is like a low bit setting, so along with your normal delay sound, tweak number 2 basically offers this reduction in bit. You can already hear as I'm turning it up. So you can end up with some pretty gnarly sounds. Kind of cool for like a soundscaping effect, I guess. So let's just have a little play. Pretty wild. So you probably heard there as I was moving the tweak number 1, it's basically adjusting the attack of my guitar, so it kind of ends up kind of like a swirl into it. Super cool sound, and that low bit thing does sound nuts, but you've got to be careful because when you crank it up, it's got a mind of its own. So they're the 6 algorithms of just pure delay sound. Number 7 is the 70-second looper, so let's dive into that. Fundamentally, it's a looper. So you've got up to 70 seconds worth of memory of playing to loop, and it will play that back to you as you wish. So you do still get the delay, albeit with a lot less parameters to tweak. So it's fundamentally just the top 3 that control your delay. So the 2 tweaks at the bottom here, this is your input level. So as you're starting to layer up loops, you might want to layer up a layer that's louder than the previous one or quieter than the previous one, so it doesn't all end up being kind of mushy. And if you then want to start soloing over the top of it or something like that, this controls your output. So I left them pretty much central just for the sake of being able to demonstrate this for you. I mean, hours of fun. Obviously having it up here, it's quite hard to sort of play and loop at the same time without being able to step on it. But you get the idea. So that was my little rundown of the FS03 from Flamma Innovation. These guys, how they're spitting out pedals that do all of this for unbelievable money. I mean, at the time of recording, these are around about 50 to 60 pounds, British pounds. Convert that to wherever you are. But it's outrageous, it's unbelievable. So having 6 presettable, is that a word? Savable presets, and a looper running in full stereo, it's phenomenal. So Flamma Innovation did send me these pedals. I'm not endorsed by them, they're not paying me or sponsoring me to do it, but they were very kind to send me the pedals to check it out, and I'm so glad they did. It may even get a place on the big board at some point, purely just because of the amount of crazy things that it can do. So go and check them out, Flamma Innovation, coming to a store near you.